They said the great Muslim general Saladin and the Christian royalty of Europe were enemies, divided by faith, divided by bloodshed. They called him the scourge of Christendom. They called her a queen of unbreakable piety. But what history never taught you is that there were letters. Letters that crossed deserts and seas. Words that slipped past swords and gates. And between those words, buried beneath ink and time, was a secret neither church nor sultanate dared to admit. This is not a tale of war. This is a tale of two souls caught in a storm of power, faith, and forbidden diplomacy. And perhaps something more. It begins in the year 1191. The Crusades were at their peak. The Third Crusade had brought chaos to the Holy Land once again. Europe had sent its mightiest kings, Richard the Lionheart, Philip of France, and countless others, to wrest Jerusalem from Muslim control. Across the battlefield stood Saladin, the Kurdish sultan who had, just a few years earlier, retaken Jerusalem in a single, earth-shaking campaign that shattered Christian morale. But what most chronicles leave out is what was happening behind closed doors. Far away from the front lines, in the shaded halls of a fortress in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Queen Sibylla of Jerusalem, recently widowed, surrounded by betrayal and besieged by politics, found herself isolated, desperate, and uncertain of who to trust. Then, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. It bore no seal, no insignia. The script was Arabic, elegant, controlled. The paper had crossed enemy lines, likely carried by a neutral merchant or perhaps a priest sympathetic to peace. It was addressed to her. The words inside were not hostile. They were not demands or threats. They were words of curiosity, of understanding. They came from Saladin. But how? Why would the Muslim Sultan, the very man responsible for her kingdom's ruin, write to her personally? That first letter, according to hidden documents discovered centuries later in a Syrian monastery, was brief. But it was revolutionary. Saladin, it said, admired the queen's efforts to preserve peace. He expressed condolences for the war's toll. And strangely, he praised her character. He even mentioned a shared belief in mercy, a shared fatigue from bloodshed. The queen didn't respond immediately, but she kept the letter. Read it, reread it. And when the whispers around her court became too loud, when her advisors pushed her toward actions she could no longer morally defend, she wrote back. That response, according to a lost page referenced in a 17th century Ottoman archive, was more personal. She questioned Saladin's intentions but admitted something that shocked even her. She envied his power to choose peace, something she, as a Christian queen surrounded by crusading men, could no longer do. The letters continued, always hidden, carried in secret, and while no one can say with absolute certainty what they all contained, the few surviving passages suggest a complex bond, one built on mutual respect, political strategy, and perhaps even admiration that bordered dangerously close to affection. Imagine it, two rulers, enemies in the eyes of the world, exchanging thoughts in secret, speaking not with the sword, but with ideas. Each word a whisper against the deafening roar of war. But not all secrets stay buried forever. By the winter of 1192, the war was changing. Richard the Lionheart, once hailed as the avenging king of Christendom, had failed to retake Jerusalem. Tensions between him and his allies had fractured the Crusader leadership. Saladin, too, faced internal rebellion and the fatigue of endless war. And then, something happened that historians still debate today. A temporary truce. Some claim it was merely strategic, a chance to regroup. But others believe something else was at play. That the truce's terms resembled points discussed in the hidden letters between Saladin and the queen. That some of the conditions reflected her voice, her suggestions, ideas that might have originated not in a war room, but in a whispered paragraph between forbidden pen pals. There's one letter, its authenticity hotly contested, that may hold the key. Allegedly written by Saladin near the end of his life, it reflects on a woman of unwavering courage, who spoke not with armies, but with fire in her ink. He refers to her not by name, but by metaphor. She wore the crown of a kingdom, but longed for a peace no crown could give. Could this be Queen Sibylla? Some historians say no. Others believe this letter, preserved in a private collection in Cairo, was Saladin's final tribute to her. Farewell never sent, because by then she had died, taken by plague during the siege of Acre. And here, the story turns darker. When word of her death reached Saladin, one chronicler, an Andalusian court poet, wrote of a night when the Sultan walked alone through the gardens of Damascus, speaking to no one, writing nothing for days. He had lost a queen, not his queen, not in the eyes of the world, but someone who had, in private, dared to speak with him as an equal. When Saladin himself died a few years later, his tomb bore no reference to their connection. No mention of the letters, no inscription beyond faith and battle. But history has a strange way of bleeding through cracks. In 1932, during renovations of a forgotten Maronite church near Sidon, Lebanon, a priest uncovered a bundle of ancient manuscripts sealed within the wall of a decaying confessional. Among them, fragments of Latin and Arabic correspondence. Ink faded, names omitted, but the context unmistakable. A queen, a sultan, shared visions of peace, regret, respect. The letters were confiscated. Whispers say they were moved to the Vatican archives, never seen again. And that's where the trail ends. Or does it? Because this story, whether romanticized or real, forces us to ask a question. What if the greatest diplomacy of the Crusades didn't happen on the battlefield, but in secret? What if, while knights swung swords and kings gave speeches, a Muslim warrior and a Christian queen found a hidden path, one paved not by conquest, but by conversation? And more disturbingly, why was this story erased? Was it too dangerous for both sides? Did it blur the lines between good and evil, between East and West? Did it challenge the myth of eternal religious conflict, suggesting that even in the bloodiest chapters of history, two sworn enemies could see humanity in one another? We may never know the full truth. The letters, if they exist, remain locked away. The evidence, fragmented, disputed, smuggled through centuries, may always be inconclusive. But the possibility is enough to shift perspective. It reminds us that history isn't just the story of swords and sieges. It's also the story of silences, of what was hidden, of what powerful people didn't want us to see. And in those shadows, we sometimes find the most human truths of all. Maybe Saladin and the Christian queen were just two rulers bound by duty, exchanging thoughts across the void. Maybe they were something more. But either way, they dared to speak when no one else would. And that may be the most forbidden act of all.